In this lesson, we are going to build out the app so that we can show all the devices that one of our users might want to select. That's the idea of this. And we'll be able to see them by manufacturer. So the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to add a gallery. Now, a gallery is just a concept for a way of holding a series, a table of items. We're going to arrange it in a particular way. So we'll arrange the objects on there and in fact the order of the objects that exist within the gallery. We're also going to add a gallery to show the manufacturers, and the purpose of that is so that we can filter things down. So that means that there'll be a relationship between the manufacturer's gallery and the device gallery. So that means those two will be connected together. We want to do some nice user interface pieces. So we're going to actually highlight an item that we've selected, and we're actually going to do some filters as stated before. We're then going to configure the text labels in the device gallery so that they present as well as we would like them to do. And we're actually going to do a little bit of conditional formatting for items that are greater than 1,000. The final tasks are that we're going to add a checkbox so we can add a device so that we can compare them. We're going to create a concept of a collection, which is an in-memory set of items so that we can compare them to each other. And we're also going to default the selection to the first manufacturer. So let's move over to Power Apps and start building the app. So the very first thing we're going to do is to add a device gallery into our app. To do that, we need to go to Insert, Gallery, and then go Horizontal Gallery. And in my case, it's called this Gallery 3 because I've done this a number of times. I'm just going to change that to Gallery 1 so it's aligned to your own experience. Now, it is a horizontal gallery. That means the items in the gallery run from left to right. Now what I'm going to do here is I need to connect that gallery to a data source. So if I go over to the data source and I can look at the different tables available. Now what I need to do is I need to connect to an Excel data source. And in this case, we are adding static data from Excel into the app. And it's a less usual way of approaching it. In normal circumstances, you would actually connect to a data source, whether or not that's Dataverse or SharePoint or SQL, lots of different data sources to choose from. So now we're actually going to go and have a look for our data source. And in my case, I've put that onto my C drive. I've put it under App in a Day, and then the Power Apps Lab content. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go and have a look at our device order data. I'm going to select open on that, and then I'm going to choose both of the tables, and I'll select devices and manufacturers and then click connect. So what it's done automatically, it's actually guessed that we wanted the devices table. We could have chosen manufacturers, but that would have actually been the wrong one to have chosen. So we now need to arrange the device gallery. So let's resize this. We're actually going to move this all the way across here, but notice actually in the top left hand corner you've got this edit gallery piece. That essentially means that we can make this a lot smaller. Now there's a bit of cleverness that's gone on already with this, because if you actually look at the width on this, you should see that it's actually the width as a whole less 32. So that's the reason why it's able to contract in this way. What I'm now going to do is create a space on the left hand side, because what we want to do is add in the manufacturers on the left hand side. So that's looking a lot neater now. It's not perfect, but it's quite a bit neater than it was before, and I think there's room for us to be able to change the size of the text and so on later on. We're going to move on to task 3 now, which is to add a gallery to show the manufacturers, but this time we won't need to connect to Excel to do so. So here we are in the Power App. I can go on to gallery and then I can insert, in this case, a vertical gallery. In fact, this is a good example of what not to do, because it's actually inserted the gallery inside inside a gallery. So if you actually look on the left hand side, you can actually see it's a gallery within a gallery. So I'm actually going to delete that one there. And I'm actually going to click on a bit of white space and then click and insert the gallery. And notice that if you actually hit the plus on the left hand side, and if you'd actually done the gallery and dragged that onto the screen, then it would have been potentially a better experience. So I'm going to resize that one now onto the left hand side there, and I will need to connect it to some data. And to do that, lots of ways of doing that. You can actually go onto the data source and you can click on manufacturers. That would be a reasonable way of getting it in. And once again, it's done a really good guess as to how we might want to present this information. Now, what I do need to do is I need to rename this and call this one manufacturer gallery. And I also need to make sure that the gallery for the devices is called the devices gallery. And you need to make sure you're actually selected, not in the middle here, but actually on the overall gallery. And if you go onto the tree view, you can see it's called gallery 4 at the moment. And we want to actually change that and call it devices gallery. In fact, I noticed that it's actually device gallery there, device gallery. I'm now going to select on the manufacturer gallery, and I want to go and have a look at the layout, and we want to make a little change to that layout. So we scroll down a little bit further, you'll see 2 columns is an option. Click on that and you can see it's changed shape. In fact, in this case, it's actually only bringing in an image. We'll change the wrap count on this, which is on the right hand side here, and make this 1. So you can play around with what we're looking at here in order to see the effect that it might have. So you can actually see these are actually all of the head offices for the various manufacturers. We can scroll through those in those locations. As you can see, these images are too large at the moment, but in order to actually get to the one where we can make the edits, click on the pencil and then you can drag this one right the way up. And don't worry if the image looks a little bit strange, we will be fixing that later on. We now need to move to File and then Save. And if you want to leave a note, you can then you can add your own note and you can say added galleries and click on Save. And if you wanted to see those version details, you click on See All Versions. We won't do that because it'll take us out of this area at the moment. And that brings us to the end of task 3. In task 4, according to this, we're actually going to connect the manufacturer gallery to the manufacturer's table. In fact, that's not what we're going to do. We've done that already. What we are going to do is we're going to change the image that we are currently connected to. Now, if we look at the Excel spreadsheet, what we can see is there are a series of images that we can use inside our app. Now, at the moment, we're actually connected to the HQ, but what we're actually going to do is we're going to make our app point at the logo field of this table. So let's go and take a look at that. Now that we're inside Power Apps, we can actually look at this image control here. Now, in fact, I'm not quite focused on it. I am now though, and it says thisitem.hq. As I say, we're going to change that. We're going to change it to be thisitem.logo. And if I just type in LO, I'm get the IntelliSense that says, well, hey, I think there's a field called logo, in which case we're going to click that and we're now connected to that field. Just one final step just to make sure we can get all of these on the screen. In fact, that's not quite what I want to do there. In fact, that's a real problem for us. So what I'm going to do is select there, click on this. Now that means I'm actually selected on this particular template, as they would call it, and I can actually try and squeeze that up. You can see it actually will squeeze up a little bit further. So we can make it a little bit further there. Now, what you'll notice is that if you actually go onto here and then go onto, in fact, go onto this thing here and go onto the template, I don't quite much. If I select on the pencil, that means I'm on the template itself, which we'll see later on. And if I actually look at template size, that's the thing that that is the size of that particular that cell, if you like, that can contain more than one thing. So we should see as we move it up and down, the number will change. That's all we're really doing. It's nothing more clever than that. And you can use formulas to change that. Now, one nice thing that you can do from a user experience point of view is you can actually add in the ability to highlight the selected item, because quite often you don't actually quite know which one you've actually selected. So this is a technique that will work on all of the galleries that you're going to use in the future. So it's a great technique for the future. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to hit this drop down here, and I'm going to go onto the template fill property. And at the moment it says RGBA 0000. That really just means that it's transparent. And what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to say, well, if, and then say this item, the item that we're currently on, and then we'll use a special property called is selected. And then what we're going to say is the color that we want it to be. And we're just going to do light blue. So we can see the IntelliSense let us do that. In fact, we can actually close the bracket now and it will work. But what we could have done is we could have actually just put a comma in there and just indicated transparent. That would also have done the same thing, and that would be the final part. So it does exactly the same thing. So you don't necessarily need that final condition there. So as you can see, that works correctly. What we're actually going to do is a slightly different technique, and what we'll do is we'll change it around. So, well, if this item, and then we'll say dot is selected. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to reference another object. So what we need to do is just verify that we've actually called this. We're actually going to reference the header label. So the header label is this label here, and it's actually called header label. That's fine. So I'm going to go back onto the template fill. In fact, I'm not quite on there. I need to be on the gallery. There we are. And so what we need to do there is we need to go to the header label. So that's an object, and you can actually see that it's selected on that. What we're now going to do is we're actually going to do a color fade. So we're going to take the color we've got originally, color fade. So color fade of what? Well, it's the header label. Which bit of the header label do you want? Well, actually we want the fill property of the header label. So we've now got the header label fill, and we need to tell it how much of that color we want. And so we're going to say 75%. And we need to, and we can close the brackets. And so you can see there what that would mean essentially is if we went onto this particular object, went onto home, and we went onto the fill property, we could actually change the color to say green, and you would see that the fill property would change. And I'll just move that one back. So that's why those things are linked together. It's a very interesting technique. We can see this in operation if we actually hit the play icon here, and we can click on things. And the alternative to that is actually hitting the Alt key on your keyboard and then clicking on things, and it will still behave in the same way. The next task is to filter the devices gallery based on the item that we've selected in the manufacturer gallery. And it's a very, very regular and normal thing to want to do. So let's move back to Power Apps in order to do that. So the way in which we do that is we actually look at the items for the devices. We can actually see that it just doesn't have any filtering on that at all. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to say, well, actually, what I want you to be is filter the devices. How are we going to filter it? We're going to filter it where the manufacturer ID is the same as the manufacturer gallery, dot selected, so we find the item that we've selected, and then what we need to do is we then need to find out the manufacturer ID of the item that we've selected, and that will do our filtering for us. So as you can see, that it's working already, and if I hit the Alt key down, I can then click on HP or Microsoft or Lenovo. All those things will work. In this next task, we're actually going to configure a text label in the device gallery. So we're going to bring in the value of the items, and we're going to make it just render in a suitable fashion. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to subtitle 2. Now remember, if you can't see this, just hit the tree view and then you'll be able to see it. So I'm going to navigate to subtitle 2, and currently it says this item dot device type, but actually we're going to say this item dot price, and that will give us the price. But what we'll see is it doesn't actually render in a particularly useful way to us. Now we're going to need to do a few things on here so that this renders slightly better. First of all, we're going to go into the width property, width, and we're actually going to make it, we're going to make this the template width. Now, one way we could do that is we could just literally expand it this way, and so on. Another way of doing it is actually just to go onto there. We can actually type in parent.width. That would get us there as well. But this time around, in fact, it's not quite right on there. But anyway, so the parent width is actually the width of the device gallery, and that's why it's getting a little bit upset with us there. So we'll just move back on that. So if we can make it something like 70, and we can just expand it to this here, and that will work nicely. We're then going to change the padding left on here and make that 10. That's going to jump it in a little bit from the left hand side. Then what we're going to do is on the actual text property of this, we're actually going to make some changes here, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually use some text formatting. So we'll say text this item dot price. How are we going to format it? We're actually going to do a particular way of formatting, which is similar to what you might see in the likes of Excel. I'm following on with the way in which the course actually progresses. We're actually going to use dollars, but we could use pound notes or any other currency. And then you do hash, comma, and then another 3 hashes, followed by 2 dots, and then we will end the quotes. And then notice we've still got an issue here, still got a problem. And if we close the quotes, then it's all going to start to render correctly. So what we should see here is if we actually go onto the play version and we go on to Acer, then we can actually see that we've actually, for the items that are greater than $1,000, we can actually see that we've actually got the comma shown there in the way that we'd like it to be shown. Now we can do some further formatting changes. We're going to change the font of the text. There are a number of different fonts that we can use. Well, in this case, we're actually going to select the item here. So there's the change of the font, and we could obviously do that elsewhere within the app as well. Continuing with the formatting of this gallery, we're going to click on what is in fact title 2, and it says this item dot device name. We're actually going to make a change to that and make it this item dot title, because there's different data included there. So, and we can obviously choose to move that around in a similar way as we've done before. So once again, you can make the change to the font. Change the font there, and you can put the padding on the left hand side. That would be padding of 10, and that would also just drop it in a little bit. Obviously, you know, we can move that across. There's clearly a lot of enhancements that you can make to this if you so wish. Task 8 is a surprisingly simple exercise. All we're going to do is we're going to make sure the items greater than $1,000 will actually render in a different font, essentially. So let's move across into Power Apps to do that. So what we'll do is we will select the subtitle 2 as it is in this case. Then what we can do is we can go on to the color, and what it's saying to us is actually I'm always going to be black in this case. And what we're going to say as well, if this item dot price is greater than 1,000, then we're going to make it orange red. Otherwise we're actually going to make it gray, and then close the bracket to finish off the formula. And you can see that the formulas have now changed. It's always good to save things as you go over to the file and then save. You can leave a note if you wish to, and then click save. And then click back to return to the app editing area. Task 9 is a very interesting task because what we're going to do now is add a checkbox in to add the device to something that we're going to call the compare list. The reason why this is interesting is it actually starts to open up the idea of having collections, which are essentially in-memory tables in this case. And that what we'll then be able to do is we'll then be able to present that information back to the user on a different screen at a later date. In order to do that, we're actually going to select the gallery, then we're going to select the template. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to insert, and we can go to checkbox. So we need to go to input there, and we can see the checkbox. Now we can click on there, or do remember that you can click on the side here, and we should be able to use the search, and we could then drag it onto the screen. That then comes up with the default way in which this gets presented. So what we're going to do is change the text to say compare. What we're then going to do is we need to have something happen when we actually select these items. And so the idea with this is if we actually look at the on check property, what happens when we check it, what we're going to do is we are going to do an action which is collect into a collection, and we're going to call it compare list. What are we going to put into that collection? We're going to put this item. So if you can imagine this as a row in an Excel spreadsheet, because it's kind of where it actually came from in the first place. And then you'll notice that it looks like you've done something wrong at this point, but all that's gone wrong is that we actually haven't closed the bracket. So it's actually happy now. What we can also do is we can then do the on uncheck operation. So I can do on uncheck, and then what we'll do is we will remove and we're going to remove it from the compare list. Now it knows that it exists already, and the question is what are we going to remove, and we do comma, and we'll do this item, and then close the brackets. So in theory this should work for us now. There will be one further thing that we'll do on this, but we'll just hold our horses at the moment. So what we're going to do is we are going to now click on the compare two items, and then we can actually go to view collections, and we'll be able to see that actually we've got those two items in there. We can now move back and we can actually uncheck them as well. And we should be able to see that if we go to view collections, we can actually see our compare list is now empty. Now we have to do one final operation, because if we add these items in and then we jump around and then move back, you'll actually see that it's actually, we know it's in the collection, but actually it's not showing that it's in the collection. So we need to be able to reference that collection to see if it's actually been included. So the idea with this is we actually say, well, what's the default for this? And the actual, we need to essentially say, it's saying it's default of false. That means that it doesn't have a tick in the box. And what we actually say is, well, actually, if this item is in the compare list, then it's true. So it's a bit like saying if this item is in the compare list, then true. But in fact, it's a much more efficient formula just to say this item in compare list, and then now we can actually see items that have actually been included there already. What that means is we can now go and select different items from different manufacturers. And if we actually come out and go to view collections, we can actually see we've got 4 items from different manufacturers. Now clearly the end game for this will not be for us to present it in a collection, it will be for us to present it in another gallery. And now to finish up, we'll just hit the back button and then we'll actually uncheck the various items that we've selected. So we'll have to remember those, move on to that, and then go on to the surface, and then we go on to the Acer as well, and we'll untick those. One final check, go to view, collections, and we have an empty collection. So now what we've done is on task 9, we've added a checkbox to add the device to the compare list, and then we also created a collection for the selected devices, rolled straight through from task 9 into task 10. The next task is a really straightforward one. We're just going to make the default selection in the manufacturer's gallery to be the first manufacturer. In order to do that, we need to select on the gallery itself, then move over to default, and then we need to say first manufacturers, and then close the brackets. So that brings us to the end of the exercise on adding device galleries. So what we've done is we added the device gallery, we've also arranged the device gallery, and that was after we connected it to some data. We added another gallery to show manufacturers and connected that to the manufacturers table. We then highlighted the selected manufacturer. We then filtered based on the selected manufacturer, and we did some configuration of text labels as well, and also some conditional formatting for items greater than 1,000. We then moved on to then adding a checkbox to add a device into the compare list and create a collection for those devices, and then finally did a small change to the default selection to the first manufacturer.